I was 7 months pregnant when my world collapsed in that sterile hospital corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I clutched my swollen belly, feeling my baby kick frantically inside me as if sensing the danger we were both in. The doctor's words still echoed in my mind. "Mrs. Johnson, your baby has a severe congenital heart defect. Without immediate surgery after birth, survival chances are less than 20%. But that wasn't even the worst part. As I sat there, trembling and trying to process this devastating news, my husband David walked out of that hospital room and never looked back. He couldn't handle it, he said. A defective baby wasn't what he signed up for. In one crushing moment, I went from being an excited, expectant mother with a loving partner to a single woman facing the possibility of losing everything I held dear. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my entire life. David filed for divorce immediately, claiming he couldn't cope with the stress and financial burden of a special needs child. Our joint bank accounts were frozen during the legal proceedings, leaving me with barely enough money to buy groceries, let alone pay for the specialized medical care my unborn baby would desperately need. I was working as a part-time librarian, a job I loved but one that barely paid enough to cover rent in our small apartment. Without David's income, I was drowning financially. The medical bills were already piling up. Specialist consultations, advanced ultrasounds, genetic testing, each one adding another layer of debt I couldn't possibly manage alone. The loneliness was suffocating. David had been my best friend for 8 years, my husband for 3. We had planned this pregnancy together, painted the nursery together, chosen names together. Now that nursery sat empty and silent, a painful reminder of dreams that seemed to be crumbling around me. My family lived across the country, and while they offered emotional support over phone calls, they couldn't provide the practical help I desperately needed. Sleep became impossible. Every night, I would lie awake feeling my baby move inside me, wondering if these precious moments of life I could feel would be all we'd ever have together. The doctors had explained that my baby had hypoplastic left heart syndrome. Essentially, the left side of the heart was severely underdeveloped. It would require a series of complex surgeries, starting within days of birth, with no guarantee of success. I spent hours researching the condition online, reading medical journals and parent forums until my eyes burned. The statistics were terrifying. Even with the best surgical intervention, many babies didn't survive the first procedure. Those who did faced a lifetime of medical complications, multiple surgeries, and an uncertain future. I began to understand why David had run. The fear was overwhelming. The financial reality was crushing. The initial surgery alone would cost over $200,000. The follow-up procedures could reach into the millions over my child's lifetime. My basic health insurance through the library would cover some costs, but the co-pays and uncovered expenses would bankrupt me. I applied for every form of assistance I could find: Medicaid, charity care programs, hospital financial aid. But the paperwork was endless and the approval processes could take months. As my due date approached, I felt increasingly isolated and desperate. Other expectant mothers in my childbirth class talked excitedly about nursery decorations and baby names, while I sat silently, knowing my baby might not live to see their first week. The instructors' cheerful discussions about breastfeeding and sleep schedules felt surreal when I wasn't even sure my child would be conscious enough to eat normally. I started experiencing complications in my 8th month. My blood pressure spiked dangerously high, and I was diagnosed with preeclampsia. The doctors wanted to monitor me closely, which meant more medical bills and time away from work I couldn't afford to lose. I was put on bed rest, which meant giving up my job right when I needed the income most. The stress was affecting my baby too. During one particularly frightening appointment, the fetal heart monitor showed irregular rhythms that sent the medical team into high alert. I was rushed to the hospital, convinced I was losing my baby before we even had a chance to fight for their life. After 6 hours of monitoring, the heartbeat stabilized, but the doctors warned me that early delivery was becoming increasingly likely. I felt completely alone in that hospital room, watching the monitors track my baby's struggling heartbeat. No husband holding my hand, no family members driving through the night to be with me. Just me, my unborn child, and a future that seemed impossibly bleak. I prayed to a God I wasn't even sure I believed in anymore, begging for a miracle I didn't think I deserved. It was during one of my lowest moments, sitting in the hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m. because I couldn't sleep, that I met Dr. Sarah Chen. She wasn't my doctor. She was a pediatric cardiac surgeon who happened to be grabbing coffee between emergency surgeries. She noticed me crying over my untouched sandwich and instead of walking away like most people did, she sat down across from me. "Rough night?" she asked gently, and something in her voice broke down the walls I'd built around my heart. I found myself telling this stranger everything. About David leaving, about the financial impossibility of my situation, about my terror that my baby would die because I couldn't afford to save them. Dr. Chin listened without judgment, her eyes full of compassion I hadn't seen from a medical professional in weeks. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "I've been looking for a case like yours." She explained that she was pioneering a new surgical technique for hypoplastic left heart syndrome, one that had shown promising results in clinical trials but needed real-world application. She had been waiting for the right patient, someone whose baby could benefit from this cutting-edge approach. But there was a catch. To qualify for the experimental procedure, the surgery would be performed at no cost to me, covered entirely by research grants and hospital charity funds. I could barely breathe. Are you saying my baby could have a chance?" Dr. Chin smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from anyone in months. "More than a chance. This new technique has an 85% success rate, compared to the 60% success rate of traditional approaches. But I have to be honest with you, it's still experimental. There are risks." The risks seemed insignificant compared to the alternative. Without any surgery, my baby had virtually no chance of survival. With the traditional surgery I couldn't afford, the odds were barely better than a coin flip. But this new procedure, performed by one of the country's leading pediatric cardiac surgeons, offered real hope. Over the next few days, Dr. Chin introduced me to her entire team. There was Dr. Martinez, the anesthesiologist who specialized in treating the tiniest patients. Nurse Rebecca, who had been in the cardiac unit for 15 years and had seen hundreds of babies through these critical surgeries. Dr. Patel, the neonatologist who would manage my baby's care in those crucial first days after surgery. But it wasn't just the medical team that rallied around us. Word of my situation had somehow spread through the hospital, and staff members began reaching out in ways I never expected. The social worker helped me apply for emergency housing assistance. The hospital chaplain, though I wasn't religious, spent hours just listening when I needed someone to talk to. Even the cafeteria workers who had seen me crying over countless untouched meals, started slipping me extra portions and refusing to let me pay. The transformation was remarkable. Just weeks earlier I had felt completely abandoned by the world. Now I was surrounded by people who barely knew me but were invested in my baby's survival. Dr. Chin explained that she had specifically chosen to work at this hospital because of their commitment to treating patients regardless of their ability to pay. It was a value system I had never encountered before, and it restored my faith in humanity. As my due date approached, Dr. Chin walked me through every detail of the planned surgery. She showed me 3D models of hearts, explained exactly how the new technique differed from traditional approaches, and answered every single question I had, no matter how basic or repetitive. She never made me feel stupid or burdensome, despite the fact that she was one of the most respected surgeons in her field. The night before my scheduled cesarean section, Dr. Chin stopped by my room one last time. She sat on the edge of my bed and took my hand, a gesture that would have seemed inappropriate from any other doctor but felt perfectly natural from her. "Tomorrow is going to be scary," she said honestly. "But I want you to know that your baby is getting the absolute best care possible. This team has been working together for years, and we've successfully performed this procedure dozens of times in clinical trials. Your little one is in the best possible hands." I squeezed her hand, tears streaming down my face. "I don't know how to thank you. You've given us hope when I thought there was none left." She smiled, that gentle smile that had become so familiar. "Just focus on being the strong mother I know you are. That's all the thanks I need." Emma Grace Johnson was born at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in October, weighing 4 pounds and 3 ounces. She was immediately whisked away to the cardiac unit, her tiny body connected to more machines than I could count. But she was alive and she was fighting. The surgery was scheduled for the following morning. They needed to give her body time to adjust to life outside the womb first. That night was the longest of my life. I sat by her isolette in the NICU, watching her chest rise and fall, memorizing every detail of her perfect little face. She had David's nose and what looked like my stubborn chin. Her fingers were so tiny they could barely wrap around my pinky, but her grip was surprisingly strong. Dr. Chin came by at midnight to check on us both. "She looks like a fighter," she said, gently stroking Emma's forehead. "That's exactly what we need tomorrow." The surgery took 7 hours. 7 hours of pacing the waiting room, drinking terrible coffee, and clinging to every update the nurses brought me. Dr. Chin had promised to update me every 2 hours, and she kept that promise religiously. Each update was cautiously optimistic. The procedure was going according to plan, Emma's body was responding well, there were no unexpected complications. When Dr. Chin finally emerged from the operating room, still in her surgical scrubs, her exhausted smile told me everything I needed to know before she said a word. "She did beautifully," Dr. Chin said, tears in her own eyes. "The new technique worked perfectly. Emma's heart is functioning better than we could have hoped. She's going to need time to recover and there will be follow-up surgeries as she grows, but she's going to be okay." I collapsed into Dr. Chen's arms, sobbing with relief and joy and overwhelming gratitude. My baby was alive. Not just alive but thriving. The impossible had become reality. The recovery was long and sometimes frightening. There were setbacks. Moments when Emma's oxygen levels dropped, days when she seemed too tired to fight, nights when alarms would sound and send the medical team rushing to her bedside. But through it all, she continued to prove that she was indeed the fighter Dr. Chin had recognized. 3 weeks after surgery, I was finally able to hold my daughter properly for the first time. She was so small, still attached to monitoring wires, but she was warm and real and mine. She opened her eyes and looked directly at me, and I swear she smiled. The nurse assured me it was probably just gas, but I knew better. Emma was telling me we had made it through the worst part together. The financial support continued to pour in from unexpected sources. The hospital's charity care program covered all of Emma's medical expenses. A local church, despite the fact that I had never attended their services, organized a fundraiser that helped me catch up on rent and bills. Co-workers from the library, many of whom I barely knew, pooled their resources to create a care package with baby supplies and groceries. Most surprisingly, my ex-husband David reached out after Emma's surgery. He had heard through mutual friends about what had happened and he wanted to meet his daughter. I was hesitant at first. His abandonment during my pregnancy had left deep wounds. But when I saw him holding Emma for the first time, tears streaming down his face as he apologized over and over, I realized that sometimes people need time to find their courage. David didn't ask to reconcile romantically, and I wasn't ready for that anyway. But he asked to be part of Emma's life, to help support her medical needs, and to be the father he should have been from the beginning. It was a start, and it meant Emma would grow up knowing both her parents loved her, even if we weren't together. Dr. Chin became not just Emma's doctor but something like family. She was there for every follow-up appointment, every milestone, every moment of celebration and concern. When Emma smiled for the first time, really smiled, Dr. Chin was the first person I called. When she rolled over at 4 months, Dr. Chin cheered as loudly as I did. Today Emma is 2 years old. She's a happy, energetic toddler who loves books, just like her librarian mama. She has a scar down the center of her chest that tells the story of her incredible journey, and she'll need additional surgeries as she grows, but her prognosis is excellent. Dr. Chin says she expects Emma to live a full, normal life. She might even be able to play sports when she's older. Looking back on those dark months when I thought I was losing everything, I realize now that I was actually finding everything that mattered. I found strength I never knew I possessed. I found a community of people who cared about strangers. I found medical professionals who saw healing as a calling, not just a job. I found hope in the darkest possible circumstances. Emma's middle name, Grace, represents the unmerited favor that carried us through an impossible situation. Every day with her is a gift I never take for granted. She's taught me that miracles don't always look like what we expect. Sometimes they look like a tired surgeon staying late to answer a scared mother's questions, or a hospital team that treats charity cases with the same dedication as paying patients, or a tiny baby who fights harder than anyone thought possible. The surgery seemed impossible, but my baby didn't just survive. She thrived. And in the process she saved me too. If this story resonated with you, if you've faced similar challenges with a child's health crisis, or if you've experienced the power of unexpected support during your darkest moments, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below sharing your own story. your words might be exactly what another parent needs to hear today. If this story gave you hope or reminded you that miracles are possible, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more real stories of resilience and triumph. Together we can remind each other that even in our most impossible moments, there is always reason to keep fighting.